Hi everyone, I'm Jim Killam. I serve on the communications team for the Wycliffe Global Alliance. As you may know, in the Alliance we have more than 100 organizations and they all look very different. Some are huge organizations with hundreds or even thousands of people. Some are only a small handful of people. There is something we have in common though, along with the fact that we all work for the same cause in Bible translation, and that would be that no one of us ever comes to work in the morning and thinks today is the day there's going to be a crisis, that we're going to face something we've never faced before. But as so many of us know, they do happen. Maybe a leader has died or become incapacitated. Maybe the action of a member or a partner has brought some heavy scrutiny to your organization. Maybe there's been a natural disaster or a human-caused disaster that has suddenly thrown everything into chaos for you. You could probably think of 100 different scenarios that would represent a crisis for your organization. What we've assembled for you is some training in how to create a crisis response plan. Most organizations don't have one of these and they don't realize it until they need one, and it's something we would hope you'll never need, but it's also something I know you'll be very glad to have and be able to put away and know that it's ready if you ever need one. And we have several components of this training for you. This first video that I'm part of, I'm going to be going through an introduction and some basic guidelines on how to develop your organization's crisis response plan. We know they're all going to look different. We know every organization is a different size and scope, but we have some universal ideas and plans that we think can help you begin to assemble your scenarios and what you would do. Then we have an interview with Silke Sauer, whose former organization, Wycliffe Germany, experienced a tragedy with one of their members being murdered a few years back. And Silke talks with me about what they learned about handling a crisis of that magnitude and such an emotional, tragic event for that organization and for all of us. And then finally, we have an interview with Vicki Mixon, who is the Executive Vice President and Chief Communications Officer for Wycliffe USA. And she talked with me about responding to a crisis that has changed the world for all of us in the past year, and that's of course the global pandemic. But I think their experience in employing their crisis response plan for the pandemic may be instructional to all of us in preparing a plan for our own crisis as it may come up. So, with all of that as a short introduction, let's get started. The first thing we may want to do here is all be on the same page in terms of what is a crisis. And so these are some dictionary definitions that I think may be relevant to us as we take a look at what a crisis response plan may mean. So a crisis can mean a time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger. It could be any event or period that will lead or may lead to an unstable and dangerous situation affecting an individual, group, or all of society. For instance, that could be a war, that could be a natural disaster, something like that where people are in danger. It could be terrorism. Next one, an unstable or crucial time or state of affairs in which a decisive change is impending. Well, COVID-19 has certainly been one of those, hasn't it? And there are lots of decisive changes being made during this crisis. There are other crises that also demand decisive change. We'll have some examples here in a second. And then a crisis can be just a time when a difficult or important decision must be made. And that would, I think, apply to almost all crises. Here are a few potentials. This is not certainly an all-inclusive list, but there are a few things here that have been common to ministry organizations especially. And by common, I don't mean that this happens to everybody, but just these are situations that have occurred. So death or incapacitation of the organization's leader, and that can be death by natural causes or that could be through some tragic circumstance. But that's going to demand your organization respond in some way because that does create a crisis. The next one, public criticism of the organization's work. We run into that in ministry all the time, particularly when we're in a kind of a hostile cultural environment, and there aren't too many cultural environments that aren't hostile at this point to at least some of our work. So that comes up often. Next one, a member is attacked, kidnapped, or killed. As we get to the second video in our training here, you'll be hearing from someone who talks specifically about an instance where that happened and some of the steps that had to be taken and some of the hard decisions that had to be made. So the next one, the office is attacked. Again, that could be a situation of terrorism. It could be as a result of an act of war somewhere. It could be just being in the line of fire when something's going on near your office. But those types of things are always, unfortunately, a possibility. Next thing is a natural disaster. I've worked with lots of these over the years, particularly hurricanes and tornadoes here in the U.S. where I live. Those are common natural disasters every year. And often there are ministry offices that are either in the line of storm or they are responding to that storm and helping people in their region. So that always has the potential for disrupting everything you're doing. Acts of terrorism or war, I've already mentioned that. It may be in the region where your office is. It may be in the region where you're in a region where your organization works. So those are a distinct possibility where some of our organizations are working. Next one, allegations of violence or abuse involving a member. We've seen far too many of those situations in the U.S. over the last several years where prominent leader of a ministry steps down and it turns out they're being accused of, generally it's been sexual in nature, but it can be just abusive in different ways. So if those become known, and I was going to say if they become public, but even if they're not public but known within your organization, that's a crisis, and that's something to be well aware of and to respond to. Next thing is maybe similar, scrutiny for a leader's or a member's moral failure. We'll take a short look at a current case in a few minutes about that. Next one, scrutiny for the handling of allegations of abuse or misconduct. These are all somewhat related in this little section. So maybe the person has been accused of something and is innocent, but maybe the organization still handled it kind of badly. So there's that possibility. Next one, scrutiny regarding theological issues. I think within the Wycliffe world, we all know of issues where things like that have come up. It could be featuring some of the pronouns for God, for instance, or the Son of God issue that came up a few years ago. Those kinds of things that become theological issues. It could be the next thing too, scrutiny regarding positions on social or political issues, particularly social issues relating to sex or relating to something like abortion. Those kinds of issues are very divisive in my culture in America and probably in yours also. Next thing that could happen could be your website or your social media accounts could be hacked. They could be taken down, or damaging misinformation could be distributed through those, and you have no control over who is controlling your website. So you may have to know how to shut that down and then how to respond quickly and respond to whatever misinformation has been put out there. And the last one is kind of a similar thing there, a sudden lack of access to the website or social accounts where you are unable to maybe get on the internet at all, or maybe not get to your accounts wherever those may be. So those are a few. Again, that's not an all-inclusive list. I know that depending on where in the world you are working, some of these are more relevant than others, but that's at least a starting list so you have an idea of the kinds of things we're talking about when we say crisis response. I do want to put a scripture in front of us all before we get too much farther down this path, because as Wycliffe, we of course are all about scripture and God's word being the center of everything we do, and it is with crisis response as well. So I'm going to use another one in a bit here, but for right now, I think Philippians 4, 6, and 7 is a wonderful place to start. And it says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Philippians 4, 6, and 7. Again, that's not a step-by-step crisis response plan, but there are principles in God's word that certainly guide the way we do this. So I think that's a good one to start with. Let me talk about a few common mistakes that happen in response to a crisis. And often this is when there is no plan. And so one of the things that I hope you take from this training is whatever size our organization, whatever amount of work we're doing, we need a plan. And I hope we never have to use it, but we better have something that we can rely on if we ever need it. So that's the first common mistake here, is failure to anticipate a crisis and develop a plan, thinking this could never happen to us. The second one is ignoring the issue and hoping it will go away. And that's often the case with accusations of, say, abuse or something like that, or maybe it's a hostile work environment. There's something going on where maybe leadership has decided it's just going to ignore it and hope it goes away. And of course, that's not a good approach. And that's an approach where something will get far bigger and a much larger problem for your organization. Next one, failure to acknowledge the issue with staff or members and to answer questions. So often we think about crisis response as being about the reputation of our organization to someone on the outside. We forget that maybe people are hurting in our organization, and we better have a plan for that as well, because we don't simply want to be focused on what's happening or what the perception is outside. So that next one would be similar, forgetting about staff care. And that means, again, people are hurting very likely if you're in a crisis, and you need to be aware of that and respond to that just as much as you're responding to anything about the reputation of your organization. And then failure to know who speaks publicly for the organization. That's a big one. And that's one that I hope we will make some progress on even in this short session that we're doing right now. And that is identifying who makes statements on behalf of the organization when you're in a crisis. And it may not be the same person for every type of situation, but you need to know, and you need to know how to make that decision. And then some common results from these mistakes. Oh boy, these happen so often. The stakeholders don't know what's happening and they become confused or angry. And I'll talk about stakeholders in just a minute, so there's no confusion there. But people who are affected don't know what's happening and they become confused or angry. That could be people in your organization. It could be outside people. The next one, the organization is perceived as inept or negligent or worse. Maybe the perception is that someone did something very evil on purpose. Anything you can do to diffuse something like that rather than being perceived inaccurately is helpful. Another common result, people suffer. Morale suffers. Financial donations may drop. Recruitment or retention, maybe no one wants to join your organization because of something that's just happened that's been very public. So the public reputation can suffer, and all this could lead to the progress of the work suffering, which is a very large problem, as we all would recognize. So those are some common mistakes, common results. I want to give you some guiding principles in creating your plan. And I'm not going to give you step by step how to create this plan. I'm going to give you some suggestions. But again, because every organization is different, every organization is going to have to do their own plan, and it's going to look a little different. But these principles, I think, can apply to us all. The first one, and this goes back to the Philippians verse I just gave you, before anything else, pray. That may be as a small group of leaders, it may be as an organization, but be sure that your prayer engine is working and that people in your organization and people who are connected with your organization are praying. They may need a little information first, but at least within your leadership, be praying right away. Act quickly is the next one, and that is, again, don't hope it's going to go away by not acting, but you may need to take some quick and decisive action. That not only can diffuse a hard situation, but it also can lead to better confidence in your own organization, within your organization. Strong leadership, clear messaging. Again, first internal, then external. Remember your own people. Don't just think about reputation. Don't underreact, don't overreact. So there's some discernment involved there, isn't there? Where you as leaders and anyone who's on your crisis response team needs to talk that over about what would be overreacting, what's needed, what isn't at this point. Again, I can't emphasize this enough, and I continue to mention this, but people's well-being comes first. If someone's been hurt, that's priority one, more so than your reputation. Of course, you'll get to the other things, but people's well-being comes first. Next one, deal effectively with a negative news story. There may be multiple audiences to that negative news story if it's gotten media coverage, but there are ways to deal with these things, and it's high priority because that message can get out of control in a hurry when it's not in your care and your hands. Finally, we get to protect the organization's reputation, and that would be with stakeholders, with the public, with your own staff, all those things. And so, again, that's definitely part of a plan, just not the very top thing. And then finally, maintain the confidence of key stakeholders. People need to know that you're on top of this, that you're dealing with it well, that you have a plan. And then this is a quote that I've used over the years. There are many versions of this quote. This is the one I've always used. In the absence of information, people create their own. Remember that as you hesitate. As people are waiting for information, the longer they wait, the longer they don't hear from you, the bigger chance there is that their information will be created on its own and sent out. So be aware of that. Okay, I told you I would define stakeholder. Here's what that means. It's a person or a group who can affect or be affected by the situation. And again, these are the people you're caring for with this crisis response plan. So a stakeholder for a ministry typically would be some of these folks, the staff, family members of staff, board members, prayer partners, financial partners, partner organizations, other organizations that you're working with in the field. The church and the public can be stakeholders as well. Those are broader categories, but those also have to be considered. But again, kind of look at the order I've put these in and think about priorities there and what needs attention first and who can be affected the most. And that may change or vary depending on the situation you're in. Let's talk about developing a plan. Again, I'm not going to give you specific step by step, but I'm going to give you some principles and some guidelines in creating yours. So you're going to want to know who should be involved, who are your stakeholders, who speaks for your organization, What are your communication channels? And by that, I mean, how do you get messages out to the people who are your stakeholders? Do you use email, social media, messaging media, say WhatsApp or something like that? Do you use your website? Do you use some combination of all of that? Do you use videos? Know what all those channels are and how those need to be deployed in responding to a crisis. And then a related question is, what are the communication channels about us? And that just means, where might this be talked about or reported about? And that could be other social media networks other than the one that you create. It could be news media. It could be churches. There could be many other places where this is talked about. And so you need to be aware of what those are. So these are good questions to answer as you start to formulate your plan. Now, that first question, who should be involved? I got some good information from a short course taught by Ed Stetzer at Wheaton College here in the U.S. Ed writes for Christianity Today. Some of you may have seen some of his writing before. So I want to be sure that I credit him, because some of this next information is indirectly from him. But he says who is on the team is more important than how many are on the team. And again, this is a situation where if you're a very large organization, this may be a bigger challenge, because there are going to be people who feel like they should be on the team and they were left out, and they're a little unhappy about that. Smaller organizations, sometimes it's very obvious who that should be. Larger organizations, it may be a harder question sometimes. So the way we're going to approach this, to talk about who should be on your team, is think of your organization as Mr. Potato Head. Some of you know right away who Mr. Potato Head is. Some of you may have seen the movie Toy Story and remember him from there. I actually, as a kid, owned a Mr. Potato Head kit, and it was a pretty big deal when I was a kid, and I think you can still get Mr. Potato Head kits here in the U.S. I don't know how big it is internationally, but you'll kind of track where I'm going here. So let's talk about who should be involved. We'll use that hat to mean the head. Typically, that's going to be your organization's leader, the president, the executive director, whatever the title is. That person needs to be involved in this crisis response team that you're creating. So that's kind of an obvious one. Next, we'll talk about the brain or the mind. That would be someone who can take complex ideas and simplify them. Now, that may be someone who's a writer. It may be someone who's one of your best strategists. It may be your organizational leader. These don't all have to be separate people, but these are aspects that we need to be thinking about. So again, a head and then a mind or a brain. Next one would be eyes and ears. And this is someone who can pay attention to details. And this becomes very important, as there are a lot of things to remember as you are working through a crisis and as you are implementing your crisis response plan. Lots of details, lots of lists, things like that. You need to have someone who's very good at paying attention to those kinds of things. So that's eyes and ears. Hands and feet. That would be people who are skilled at getting things done. We can all sit in planning rooms for hours and days and have the best plans and then have no one to actually carry out these plans. So someone on your team has to be the one that can mobilize and can get things done and can help others get things done. So those are hands and feet. The next one would be heart and soul. And that just means there's someone in your organization who really is the heart and soul of your organization. Again, it could be the leader. It may be someone who's been there the longest and who has even an honorary position at this point. Maybe they're semi-retired. But it's somebody who really, when you think of that organization, you think of that person very quickly. And so that person or one of those people, it's a good idea to have them on this team, heart and soul. The nose, and that can be someone who can anticipate hard or difficult questions or who sees potential traps. So it could be a contrarian in some ways, someone who can take a look at a plan coming together and say, wait a minute, we haven't thought of this. So you need someone who is willing to speak up and someone who is willing to raise difficult questions when needed. Sometimes those aren't the most popular people in a meeting, but sometimes they are the most important. And then finally, the mouth. And the mouth is someone who is gifted at verbal and written communication. So you're going to have to be probably making statements both to your internal staff and maybe to the public. You're going to have to be doing written communication. That could be anything from a press release to writing social media posts or messaging. And you need someone who is very good at that. There is Mr. Potato Head. There is the list. For those of you who are not visual learners, here's the list typed out. So you can tell, you can stop the video on this slide if you need to and want to take any notes about who these people are. Again, these are 7 different kinds of people, but it's not necessarily 7 different people. There may be some combinations here. We just need to be sure that these qualities are represented on a crisis response team. Here's some team roles and a key contact list that you would have to put together. So again, these are people that you may want on your team that may have some of the attributes we just talked about. The president and CEO, almost a given. That person needs to be on your crisis response team. Vice president, if you have one. Financial officer, communications officer for sure if you have one. If you do not, you may need an outside person here, and we'll talk about that. And then perhaps a legal counsel, and that is very often someone who's external. You may need someone who's a lawyer, someone who has legal experience in handling whatever the situation is you're dealing with. I know a lot of ministry organizations do have legal counsel that they call on from time to time, and if you don't, it's a good idea to have someone who can at least answer a question now and then. And then potentially some other people that you may want on this team would be a board member. It could be an outside expert in whatever happens to be going on. So let's say that you're talking about the pandemic. You may need a doctor. You may need, someone affiliated with your organization who's a medical expert or healthcare worker. So someone who's an expert in whatever that topic is could be very helpful. And then possibly a national or local church representative, again, depending on the situation, but particularly if the church is involved in the crisis in some way, then you may need to hear that voice on your team as well. Keep this team small. That's important. We don't want 50 people on this committee if you are a large organization. If you're a small organization, you don't need everybody, even if you're 5 people. Maybe it's 3. Not every member of your organization's leadership team needs to be part of the crisis response team. This is not about job titles. It's not about hierarchy. This is about being small and nimble and able to make quick decisions that help the organization. But don't ever think of it as a have-to thing. It's really more what is the best way to deal with a crisis and who do we need and what skill sets do they have. So again, stakeholders, you're having to decide who needs to be informed immediately about a situation. That may be staff. That's definitely staff, in fact. It may be family members, board members, prayer partners, financial partners, partner organizations. I showed you this list before, but here I've got it separated with the church and the public being a little farther down the list. Your stakeholders are generally people who are going to be impacted by this and who you know. The public and the church certainly need to be aware at some point, maybe not right away. Case-by-case situation there. Mentioned this before. Who speaks for the organization? There is tendency for anybody in the organization to want to talk about this, whether it's to friends, whether it's to the media, if you have people contacting you, whether it's within your organization. but it's important that one voice is speaking here. And I don't mean necessarily one person. I mean that you've gotten together on messaging so that the messages match. And so you're not contradicting each other. Everyone needs to know to direct people to a certain person depending on the question. So again, for instance, if you are dealing with a legal situation involving a member of your organization, you may be referring people to a legal expert. If you're dealing with questions about a pandemic, you may have a healthcare worker that is answering those questions. If they want to know something about something that's impacted your organization, or that there's been a tragedy or something, then maybe it is your president or your leader. And of course, this also could be someone who's designated as an organizational spokesman or spokeswoman. It could be someone in the communications department, someone who is good at dealing with the public and is well-spoken and becomes the voice of the organization publicly in this time. What's your primary channel? It's often your website. Usually it's your website, though it may be social media like Facebook or WhatsApp. It may be emails, it may be YouTube. There are many ways you can get your messaging out, but your website is primary because that's where people are going to probably look first if they want to know what's happening. Probably followed closely by your social media accounts. So pay attention to all those things when you have to have someone speaking for the organization. And then secondary examples, I mentioned some of these: social media, emails, texts, phone messages. And then some questions to ask when you think about that. Like, again, let's say that you're in the middle of a natural disaster and you're getting contacts from media that want to know how your organization is handling that. Well, what do they need from you? What kind of information are they looking for, and how can you be most helpful? Speaking as someone who used to work in media, and I've been a career journalist, and I know that most journalists are not out to get you. They are looking for a story, and they are needing to talk to the correct person. But you'll find most to be friendly. You'll find most to, I think, want to do an accurate and fair story. But as you'll hear from Silke in the video accompanying this one about the Wycliffe Germany member who was killed, don't assume that the media are your friends or are your collaborators. They have one job, you have one job, and those may conflict at times. So it doesn't mean you have to dislike them or be at odds, but realize that you do have to be careful what you say and who says it to news media. And then the last thing here is, what misunderstandings can we anticipate, especially by news media that's unfamiliar with our work? So Bible translation is not a very familiar topic for most journalists. And so if you can be able to explain some things a little bit, that's probably very helpful. Okay. 10 steps every organization can take in implementing and developing a plan. So designate your team, first of all. Who's going to be on this team? That's what we've spoken primarily of here. List your guiding principles. Don't forget about prayer. So you can look back to that slide and some of those guiding principles that we suggest. Create your contact list, and that's names, phone numbers, emails, also spouses' contact information. That can be very important if someone is someplace where they don't have access to phone service. So just be sure that you know how to contact your people at all times and have that list ready. List your stakeholders, primary and secondary. We've talked about that a little bit. Number 5, arrange emergency outside consultants in areas that you don't have an expert. We mentioned that. It could be legal, it could be media, it could be healthcare, it could be all kinds of different areas depending on the situation. It's a good thing to have determined who that might be in advance. For instance, if it's someone you need help with public relations and media, if there's someone in your country who you can trust and rely on, and you can form a relationship with early, then it's not a surprise call when you have to contact that person. And the same would be true of a legal expert or a lawyer. Where are the passwords for your website and social media accounts? It's amazing how often those kinds of things get lost and needed in a crisis, and someone has to go hunting for those. Where are the extra keys to the office? Where, anything like that where you need this to function, and if one person is the only person that has something and they are incapacitated, you need to be sure you know what is your backup plan. List the places where information updates will be needed. That could be, again, your website, social media, it could be emails, it could be news media, wherever. But have a list ready to go of who you would need to think about and what information sources you need to think about there. Number 9, this is pretty important. Be sure once you have this plan that every team member receives a copy. So there isn't just one copy floating around on someone's computer and that person, or their computer's been stolen even, you suddenly don't have a plan. Be sure you have lots of backups. And number 10 is super important. Review and update your plan. Set something on your calendar where you get a reminder every 6 months and go through and update. Maybe you have different names, maybe passwords have changed, maybe someone has a different phone number. Check all those things, because the worst thing that could happen is you've created this plan and you get to a point where you need it and you realize the information is all out of date. So we recommend every 6 months. Some organizations do once a year, but regularly review and update that plan. So those are some steps you can take as an organization. Remember to take care of yourself and your team. I'll cite Jesus' example from Matthew 14, and that's where Jesus learns of the death of John the Baptist. And we kind of forget that all the other things that happen right after this were in the wake of him learning of John the Baptist's death. So he leaves in a boat to be alone, but the crowds follow him, and that's when he ends up feeding the 5,000. Then he insists that the disciples go back across the lake. He sends people home, and then in verse 23, it says, after sending them home, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. Night fell while he was there alone. And then, of course, after this is the storm, and he's walking on water, and the very familiar stories go on, and it's kind of back to work in a manner of speaking. But notice that Jesus did take time to take care of himself, and he made it a priority when something terrible had happened. And if you're dealing with something tragic, especially, you have to be really sure you're taking care of yourself and your team, and that is going to directly affect how well you handle a crisis. The American pastor Andy Stanley has 3 ways to be human while leading during a crisis. I think these are useful. Provide clarity, even though you cannot always provide certainty. Your presence means more than your presentation, and your voice is more important than the words you say. This is especially true for your internal folks, for your staff. They need to know that you're there. They need to know that they're going to get the best information possible from you. They need to know that you're leading and that you are remaining calm and collected, and that you have a team on this. And so those 3 points can be very important. I mentioned a while ago there's been a current case involving the Ravi Zacharias International Ministries and some allegations, more than allegations now, of sexual misconduct. Ravi Zacharias died last year. Most of you have probably heard of him. He was a Christian apologist and began this very effective international ministry. And they are in deep crisis management right now because of the information that's come out about his conduct. And so they put out a very lengthy statement recently, and also even just gave the public access to the report that a legal team had put together. And they make some very hard admissions. They acknowledge that they didn't handle things well from the outset, and they want to make things right. So if you have not seen that statement, it's an easy thing to find online, but it's a good thing to read. Again, this organization did not do everything right, but they've acted very drastically right now, and it's an example that I think will become a pretty notable case study in crisis management. And I don't know how well it's going to turn out. Things are not looking very, very hopeful for that organization right now, but who knows? But anyway, it's a good thing to take a look at. A couple of last points. Keep first things first. And again, I keep coming back to this, but take care of your people first. If our focus goes immediately to the reputation of our organization rather than the fact people may have been hurt, damaged, or violated, we may not be assessing the damage correctly. That's so important. And I think we've seen that mishandled by too many Christian organizations over the years, that all the focus goes to protecting the organization's reputation, and people who have been hurt are either disbelieved at first or they're dismissed. And that turns out to make the organization look terrible. So you were trying to protect your reputation, and you ended up making it worse by not caring for people. So, I mean, that's just a Christ-like principle, is care for people and be sensitive to people who have been hurt. Finally, we talk about collaboration a lot in the Alliance. It's one of our global principles and values. And in a crisis, our communication team can help connect you with people. We can connect you with resources. We can also help you with next steps in developing your plan. We can't develop your plan for you. One, we don't know your organization well enough, and two, we don't have those kinds of resources either. But we certainly can offer some advice if you need some help with next steps. If you find yourself in a crisis and need a little bit of help in finding experts, or even want to do that preemptively, then please let us know. You can see an email address there, info@wycliffe.net. You can also go to our website, wycliffe.net, and there's a communications page where we have a lot of training, including this training, which will be there very soon if it isn't already. Do keep us in mind. Again, we can't do that work for you, but we can certainly be of help to you. So there you have some basics about creating your organization's crisis response plan if you don't already have one. If you do have one, it may give you some ideas on how to refine that plan and improve it and update it. I hope that whatever your organization's size and wherever you're located, that this has been helpful, and that it helps you to kind of look into your own future to decide what would be the best way to set up a plan that serves your organization and your stakeholders best. Thanks for watching, and please watch the other videos as we round out this training.